Hi everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Essentials. My name is Carver Benson.
Hi, and my name is Carly Jensen. Today we will discuss Trump's trade policy.
Carly, let's dive into this whole Trump tariff situation. A 60% tariff on China, 10% on other countries. What does that actually mean for all of us?
Carver, here's the deal. A tariff is basically a tax on goods coming into the country. If Trump slaps a 60% tariff on Chinese goods, that means everything from electronics to clothes made in China gets way more expensive for American buyers.
Expensive like how?
Imagine your $1,000 laptop suddenly costs $1,600. That's a huge jump. Businesses that rely on Chinese imports, think car makers or tech companies, face higher costs. They'll either raise prices for customers or cut corners somewhere else, like jobs.
Okay, bad news for us. But Trump says this will help American companies. True?
Sort of, but not in the way he's thinking. Some companies might benefit, like those that make products similar to what we import from China. But here's the catch. A lot of US manufacturers depend on Chinese-made parts. So if you're building something here, your cost just went up too.
What about China? They're not going to sit back and take this, right?
Definitely not. China will retaliate like they've done before. They could slap tariffs on US exports like soybeans or cars. Remember, American farmers have already felt the sting of past trade wars. China might also push harder to trade with other countries, leaving US companies out in the cold.
So who wins here?
Other countries. If Chinese goods become too expensive, companies and consumers will look to places like Vietnam, Mexico, or India. They'll step in to fill the gap, taking business away from both the US and China.
Wait, let's back up. Why do we even have a trade deficit with China in the first place?
Good question. A trade deficit happens when we buy more from a country than we sell to them. And here's where it gets interesting. That deficit isn't just about trade. It's about savings and investments. Trump does not understand that the trade balance is determined by aggregate supply and demand, not by the sum of bilateral balances.
You've lost me. Savings and investments, supply and demand?
Stick with me. In the US, we don't save much as a country. Our government spends a lot, and this leads to an enormous deficit. It is mainly the government that is spending more than it invests. This leads to the trade deficit.
Trump will also extend the tax cuts he enacted in 2017. The corporate tax rate will be cut to 15%. This will lead to an even bigger government deficit.
Indeed, Trump will shrink supply and stimulate demand. This will worsen the trade balance, not improve it. And mind you, it will also create inflationary pressure.
Okay, so where does China fit into this?
Because we save less than we invest, we borrow from other countries. China sells us goods, earns dollars, and then reinvests those dollars back into the US by buying things like government bonds. It's a cycle. Tariffs won't fix that underlying savings investment gap.
So even with tariffs, the trade deficit doesn't just disappear.
Nope. It might shift to other countries, like we start buying from Vietnam instead of China, but the overall deficit stays. Tariffs are a band-aid, not a cure.
And the dollar, what happens there?
If we're buying less from China, fewer dollars flow to them, but those dollars will flow to someone else, like Mexico or Vietnam. Long-term, if global trade slows, it could strengthen the dollar, making US exports even less competitive. In this way, a tax on imports ends up as a tax on exports.
It sounds like a lose-lose.
It really is. The stronger dollar will mitigate the higher import prices and make imports attractive again. So, higher prices at first, retaliation from China, non-competitive exports, and strained global supply chains, all for a policy that doesn't solve the real problem.
But what if the goal is to reduce dependence on China? Would that work?
Not immediately. Companies can't just snap their fingers and move factories out of China. It takes years and billions of dollars to restructure supply chains. In the short term, businesses and consumers pay the price.
And in the long term?
If this trade war drags on, it could damage the global economy. Less trade means less growth. And if countries retaliate enough, we're talking about the potential for a global recession, or even a depression.
Yikes. So what's your verdict on Trump's trade policy?
It's a risky gamble that doesn't address the core issues. It might create some short-term wins for specific industries, but the long-term consequences could be devastating.
Sounds like there's more pain than gain here.
Exactly. Trade is complex, Carver. Tariffs aren't a magic fix. They're a blunt tool in a very delicate system.
Well, here's hoping policymakers start thinking more about the big picture.
Let's hope so, for everyone's sake.
Thanks for tuning in on today's chat about Trump's tariffs. Hope to meet you next time again. Bye.
Bye.